we'll get into this main segment. Rookies flying under the radar. The 2018 rookie class. It's a dandy. It's deep. There's a ton of good talent. I know there's various opinions when it comes to the wide receiver group. It's deep. Some will say, they're going to say that it's not too top heavy, that there's not many wide receiver one types, but there are those types. They just haven't necessarily shown that and played that way. We're going to talk, the other end of the spectrum, these underrated guys. And what we're going to do, we're going to use DFF ADP, for the last, I think there's been 5 or 6 drafts, something like that, for these rookies. And we're going to go over them. We're going to give you our underrated guys who we feel that we value a little bit more than the consensus and that we feel should be maybe going a little bit higher, So we'll kick it off with the quarterback position. And Jason, you have a controversial one right here.
I do. I know.
I want to hear about this one.
Well, when I was going through our ADP on DynastyFootballFactory.com, I was kind of surprised to see Josh Allen out of Wyoming going at 44. The only reason for that is, and I think everybody's kind of heard me say it, I'm a little off on him as far as a overall talent, but I think it's just because we're trying to push him up the board higher than he should be already. But when I saw him at 44, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, this is a guy who has the size that every NFL team's looking for. He has the arm. Like, you can't coach these things. And he just needs to be coached up by the proper team. I mean, he's never had a completion rate higher than 56%, I believe, is what I have in my stats. And his footwork breaks down, and he gets kind of flustered when he's got to move around the pocket, and his accuracy becomes erratic. But I feel like those things can be fixed at the moment. Do I want to see him go top 10 or top 15? I just don't think he's that kind of prospect. I do believe he's probably a late first, early second type of prospect. But to see him go at this point when I know the type of playmaking ability that he has, I'm kind of surprised to see him go in the late third, early fourth type of range.
Yeah, no, I can see that. And when you're a quarterback that's going to be drafted as highly as he is, you have that opportunity. That franchise is going to stick by you and try to give you as many reps as possible, give you as many chances as possible to solidify them, sort of to justify them drafting you. They want that talent to pan out. That's one case to where, they can dish a wide receiver to the side, a linebacker, an offensive lineman to the side. But the most embarrassing thing, I think, for GMs is missing on a quarterback, and it happens so often. That's the norm now. Missing on a quarterback, it seems like that's sort of the norm. And, you can't really fault those guys for it because nobody has this down. Nobody knows what it takes to be an NFL quarterback, or not necessarily what it takes, but what it takes to find that guy that can be your franchise quarterback. And it's the hardest thing in sports to evaluate quarterbacks, know what they got between the ears, and for them to be successful. So I think, him going towards the end of the 4th round, yeah, I can see him getting bumped up. This is a pretty good quarterback class. I still think you give it that credit. I love Cody's comment here. He says, "I got nothing. I hate drafting QBs." What's your thoughts on that, Cody?
No, I really don't like drafting QBs, but my guy was going to be Josh Allen, so I agree with him. He's got a lot of upside, and those type of guys, I don't think you should be letting go into the 4th. I mean, the early 3rd is probably where I'd be targeting him. Just obviously depends on where the draft falls and who falls there. But, I mean, he's going to go in the 1st round, and there's a chance that he goes top 15, which whoever drafts him that high is going to do whatever they can to make sure he succeeds and give him probably, a lot of rope to kind of screw up and all that kind of stuff. And so when you want to take a long shot or a flyer, I guess, on somebody, you want, especially quarterback, that's what you want. You want the guy who's going to have the opportunity and, hopefully he goes to a team that's got some talent. Because if he does, I mean, I think the sky's the limit for him.
When I have rookie drafts, I think all of my rookie drafts are about 5 rounds. What about you, Cody? For all your dynasty leagues, what do you usually sit now with your rookie drafts?
Yeah, it's about the same. I think that's the most. Some of them are like 3 rounds, I think, but most are 5. What
about you, Jason?
Yeah, around 5.
Yeah. And I only have one QB league. I think we talked about it last week when we were answering some listener questions. I think Superflex is sort of the new norm in terms of dynasty, but my quarterback is going to be Chase Litton, 6'6", 230 out of Marshall, and he's not even on our ADP. He's an undrafted free agent on our ADP, so he's 60 plus. You know, the ADP goes up to 61. And, Chase Litton is a guy 2 years ago, when I think it's 2 years ago probably, when we were doing, kicking off our Devi section for DFF. Brad, he being the guy he is, he went out and he got us, just a huge list for each position. And I was going through watching these quarterbacks. I had to just sitting there watching all these damn quarterbacks just so I can get the right rankings. And Chase Litton popped off the tape to me. I just felt, one thing I like to do is sort of watch guys before I get their measurables and stuff. That way, I'm not letting that predetermine my thought process. And I try to do that as much as I can, especially when I'm watching incoming freshmen. I don't look at, a lot of times what school they're going to, but I try not to let that sway my opinion, and I try not to look at the school they're going to when I'm writing their reports or when I'm digging into them. Anyways, Chase Litton, he stood out to me. He's a guy that he's got a really good arm. He's not going to be obviously that Josh Allen type that's throwing 66 miles per hour, but I think he's one that he has the ability to place it where it needs to be, throwing really accurate passes at times, and I've said this, dating back to when we first started this podcast, even before we started this podcast, there's that, I'm trying to think, that little mini podcast app. I did a thing on him.
Oh, yeah. I can't remember the name
Bumpers is what it's called.
Bumpers, yeah.
Yeah. I did a thing, my first one was on Brian Edwards, Chase Litton, and J.K. Dobbins back in May last year. And, I broke Chase Litton down on that, and it still sort of holds true. He's an inconsistent passer. He does have the size, though. He has the arm talent. He's a guy that I feel like he has the mental capability to be a quarterback in the NFL. He has the mobility as well. He's a guy that can get out and use his legs. He's not going to rely on that at the next level, but he can do that if he needs to. He's the guy that moves well, and I think he has a chance. He's not going to be one that's drafted highly because this quarterback class is deep. But I think there's, and you're seeing it around Twitter right now, there's some steam picking up from him. I know the NDT scouting guys are onto him now. And he's one that I like. And I've been able to watch him for the entirety of his career and follow along. So you sort of get stuck to guys like that. But I'm very objective and I don't overrate him because of that. I rate him exactly where he's supposed to be. But I think he's one that you can take a late flyer on, especially if you're in a super flex league. Why not get that prototypical type quarterback? So, like I said, his ADP at DFF is 60 plus. I think he's one that's sort of being underrated in terms of the quarterbacks. You got like Luke Falk, he has ADP. He's going higher than Chase Litton, and I think I would put more stock into Chase Litton personally than I would into Luke Falk, and maybe even put Chase Litton above Mason Rudolph, but that's just me. So you guys have any thoughts on that?
I'm not a big Mason Rudolph fan, so I would agree with that.
This is where I go in and say I don't like drafting quarterbacks. I mean, this late, I probably just don't take any of the guys you just mentioned, to be real honest. But I'm not a big fan of Litton. I'm not a big fan of guys that tall. They just don't seem to be very they don't seem to pan out, I guess. I don't know why, but it just... Go ask the Denver Broncos why, I'm not sure, but I'll pass.